Welcome to sequel number 19 of the Church of Uganda at 150 years, a celebration of our history. Today, we are looking at the civil war that returned Mwanga II to his throne. Christian exiles in Kabula waging a war against the Muslim king or the Muslim Kabaka Kalema. This is how it happened. In August 1889, the Omugabe of Ankole welcomed Henry Stanley. Yes, the Henry Stanley of the Mutesa later. Where was he coming from? Well, he was coming from Toro, and he had another person with him, Emin Pasha. Now, this Emin Pasha was actually a German man. His name was, or his earlier name was, or his childhood name was, Edward Cisnezar Karl Oscar. Now, they were fleeing because in southern Sudan, the British were fleeing. There was a Mahdist uprising, and they were fleeing with soldiers. This Emin Pasha had almost 1,500 soldiers, Nubian soldiers. Many of them, he left them in Toro as he crossed over to Ankole. And so Ntare welcomed Henry Stanley and Emin Pasha, who were on their transit. They were returning to the East African coast. And he was able to introduce them to the Christians of Buganda in Kabula. And the Christians were able to go through the war strategy with Emin Pasha. And Emin Pasha was of great help. And he even left them a few Nubian soldiers. Had he known, he would have come with a bigger force, but the bigger force had remained in Toro Kingdom. Now, as they passed through Kabula, they were given a message by the Kabula Christians, the Baganda Christians, for Ham Mukasa. Remember, Ham Mukasa was in the lake waiting for the war to begin. And they gave him a message to give to, they gave Stanley a message to give to Ham Mukasa to prepare, to be ready, because anytime the war was to begin, and it was to be fought on three fronts. There was the force that was going to attack Budu and then enter Singo. That would be commanded by Apollo Kagwa. Then there was another force which was going to pass through Gomba Maokota into Busiro, and that would be led by the Roman Catholic faction. While Hamu Mukasa was to use whatever forces he could gather and attack from the waters of Lake Victoria. Some of the Henry Stanley and Emin Pasha soldiers actually joined the war after they had accompanied them all the way into the waters of Lake Victoria. So they were able to let them free to join the war for Buganda. Now, Charles Stokes, the rogue missionary who was now an arms dealer, and Mwanga II, as well as Ham Mukasa, therefore were able to be joined by Nubians, the Nubian leftovers of Emin Pasha and Henry Stanley. And they brought their state-of-the-art boat. This boat was owned by Charles Stokes. And they docked at Sango Bay shores of Lake Victoria. And that is where they monitored the war. Because in the middle of August, the war from Kabula began. And this is how it began. That as the other forces headed in the direction I'm talking about, by September 1889, early September, Apollo Kagwa had already captured Mitiana. This other Kinywa Chamagwa had also taken over Mpiji. And Hamu Mukasa and his naval forces, how did Hamu Mukasa get these naval forces? Let's see. Hamu Mukasa had managed to go all the way to Sese Islands. There were many boats there belonging to the Buganda Navy. And all the naval soldiers he found there defected. They defected from Kalema's forces and they joined him, knowing that they are now fighting for a just cause to install Kabaka Mwanga. So they had about 50 fighting vessels. Remember, the Gabunga Lake Victoria force was one of the fiercest on the continent of Africa in those days. So 50 fighting vessels joined the war. And therefore, even at sea, they were having trouble. They were having a lot of trouble, these Kalema people. Meanwhile, Charles Stokes with Mwanga II in their special boat were just monitoring as the war progressed. A naval force of up to 200 armed soldiers engaged Kalema's Gabunga Navy forces at sea. Remember, Mukasa was in charge. And they were trying to secure, remember that the Kalema forces at sea were not simply fighting, but they were trying to secure a route for the big boat full of arms from Usukuma, which was commanded by Arabs. And this is, remember, the spies who went to Kabula, the Muslim defectors, and they had talked about this big boat. Yeah, so the big boat was not really a lie. It was true. The boat was being commandeered by Arabs, and it was shipping a lot of arms for Kalema. And Mukasa therefore ordered his naval soldiers from Bulingugwe. He ordered his soldiers to attack Bulingugwe, or to head towards Bulingugwe, and close to 80 boats headed there. The 50 from Sese and the 30 he was commanding, to try and block the Kalema forces from joining the Arab forces at sea. Now, Kabaka Kalema and Mukasa navies engaged each other at Buwaya. Now, Buwaya is very much near Buwaya, the waters near Buwaya of Lake Victoria. There was heavy gunfire there. And the Arab big boat was now passing towards Bulingugwe. Now, one Arab on the big boat shot and injured Mukasa right knee, and he fell on his boat floor. Mukasa ordered the other boats to continue the fire without retreat. The word he used was Semudda Nyuma. Later he was to write a book with the same title, Semudda Nyuma, although I told you earlier that the other papers are unpublished because of the controversial things he was saying. So here he said, without retreat, you continue. So for him, he lay in the boat as other soldiers gave him first aid. Mwanga received a message that Mukasa has been hit, and he immediately asked his former commander, Gabriel Chintu, who was a defector but now had rejoined the war, knowing that Mwanga was coming back to his throne, to guard him, and ordered Semeiru Akirenzi, who was kind of his personal guard, to join in and take over command with Charles Stokes' special boat and to attack, to dislodge the Arabs. So Gabriel Chintu directed the boat towards the big Arab boat and fired at the engine area. Now, of course, this had a result. The result was that the engine area would end up into an explosion. And that is exactly what happened. Gabriel Chintu used Mwanga's special gun, which with only a single round sprayed bullets that claimed several Arab lives on that boat. Now, with the targeted fire by the other soldiers at the big fuel tank of the big Arab boat, it exploded, as you can see in some of the pictures of this audio video tonight. It exploded. Now, that caused a fire that engulfed the big ship or the big boat, and the few surviving Arabs actually just jumped into the water. Arabs, of course, were good at swimming. I don't know how long they swam, but maybe they were neighbors. Some survived, and maybe others perished. Now, the burning boat was pushed to the shores of Bulingugwe Island, and Gabriel Chintu was able to pick Mwanga and Charles Stokes, and they were able to put this ammunition and firearms they had got to very good use. Mwanga II and Charles Stokes docked on Bulingugwe Island and they monitored the civil war from there as it continued. On the other fronts, Apollo Kagwa's Protestant forces or Anglican forces had entered Kyadondo, while Sebwato, Mulisi, Kinywa Kyamaggwa, the Roman Catholic Army commander, had entered Busiro, and the Kalema's Muslim forces were surrendering or fleeing. Now, Apollo Kagwa had ordered to leave a corridor to allow the defeated Muslims to run away, and also to allow Kalema to also run if he could, and that's what happened. Kalema and a few Muslim fighters continued fighting in Mengo, but there were a safe corridor where they could not hear firepower, and this was towards Nansana. Now, Nansana is the road going to Bunyoro, and they decided to flee using that direction. Actually, as a matter of fact, he didn't go very far. Kalema was in the Nansana area. Even as Apollo Kagwa was running and taking over Nkao, several days of fighting, of course, and this happened all the way till the 5th of October, when actually Kalema decided to hide in the Nansana swamps. And by that time, the rest of the forces from the single area, because now this was the Kyamaggwa force, but the single area commander, who was Apollo Kagwa, had already taken over Nkao, and therefore the civil war was almost coming to an end. Eventually, Kabaka Mwanga and Charles Stokes left Bulingugwe, docked at Munyonyo, and all the way to Nkao, and he was received with jubilation. The Christian exiles were welcomed by the Baganda young children and women, all very happy to see their fathers and their uncles back in Buganda victorious. And of course, Mwanga told them there was no need to reinstate him, because as far as he was concerned, he had never ever lost the throne. According to him, Kalema and his elder brother Chiwewa were only pretenders to the throne. The real king was him. He had never lost the throne, and therefore he was back, and therefore he was king or Kabaka again. And here ended our 19th sequel. Tomorrow we are going to see the deal. Christians had fought. Therefore they had to make a deal with Mwanga of how they wanted things to happen in Buganda. That we shall see in tomorrow's 20th sequel.